Which book is considered a literary masterpiece but you didn't like it at all? There's a quote by Mark Twain that summarizes my opinion on classics. He said that a classic was something that everybody wants to have read and nobody wants to read. We have this book in my own country called Hunger Child. It is so boring, and I was forced to read it twice in school. I have it as a movie. I don't even think that one is worth to watch. The Awakening by Kate Chopin. It was really well written, but oh my god, every single character was so unbelievably obnoxious and selfish that I hated reading every second of it. The Turn of the Screw. Considered one of the most influential early horror novels. It's an incredibly tough slog. I did finish it and I get why it's influential. But the language used really made it hard for me to enjoy it. It was released in 1898 and reads like it was written in 1598. Pretty much anything by Faulkner, because everything is a giant sentence with a bunch of superfluous words, like in this sentence that I am typing out using an iPhone that has a nice cover and that whispers to me when an interesting comment has occurred on Reddit, because I am a Reddit user and perhaps one day I will have the wit to use brevity and come up with an excellent question for our AskReddit, but until that happens I, alas, will have to settle like river sediment for the banality of my comments. No Ethan Frome. I think I had to read this in 8th grade. I probably loved reading more than most, but this was the book one remember most as a chore. The whole thing was a boring slog to get through, from the writing style to the melodramatic plot. I almost never participated in discussions in class, but I vividly remember going off on the teacher about how much I disliked reading it. What's really interesting to me is how many of the books people are listing are the books we had to read. At this point, the top 10 or so top-level comments are all books I had to read for various English classes. I wonder how much of that has to do with the inherent dislike of the books, because we never chose to read them this year. Great Expectations by Dickens. Pretty ironic that I had such high hopes. Great Expectations. It was long and overdrawn for a story that I didn't find compelling. Also, while reading it, it was pretty obvious that Dickens was paid by the word when writing it. 3 times I have tried to tackle Infinite Jest, and 3 times I have been stymied. I can read immense, dry tomes and make my way through just fine, but for some reason I always peter out about halfway through this bad boy. I know people who love it. I know I probably should love it. I'll probably give it one more try in 10 years and then set my copy on fire. Romeo and Juliet was an absolute nightmare to get through on the account that we read the entire thing aloud in class and the teacher corrected every single little mispronunciation. Given we'd never read old-timey English before, it took us about twice as long as it should have. War and Peace. Honestly, I've never felt so disconnected from a reading in my entire life. And that is counting the back of shampoo bottles. Can't bring myself to give a shit about any of the characters, even if Tolstoy himself got out of the grave and said, "Hey man, can you give it a try?" Wicked. I used to have friends that went on and on about how great the book and play was. I have no idea if the play is any good, but trying to get through the book turned out to be an impossibility for me. I got through her childhood and college years before giving up finally and returning the book to the library. The Old and New Testament felt really preachy. The Alchemist, I always felt the applause it received was exaggerated. Everything from the Romantic period. They were all paid by the word, and oh my fucking god, is it obvious. I thought Atlas Shrugged was cartoonish. The characters were so over the top it bordered on parody. The Fountainhead was the better book in every respect. Shakespeare counts, right? Romeo and Juliet. I love Shakespeare. I love Macbeth, Hamlet, Twelfth Night, Julius Caesar, Merchant of Venice, etc. But Romeo and Juliet is a pointless story about incredibly stupid people. I enjoyed 1984 for the most part. But there's a part in it where it's literally a book inside a book that Winston reads in the novel. I found that part hard to get through. But apart from that, I thought it was a pretty good book. Dracula. It's not a completely terrible book. It was just not what I was expecting and left me a bit disappointed. I was really excited to read it for a class in high school, but did not expect it to be in the format of journal entries. It just wasn't a style I particularly enjoyed. I can totally understand why it became such a classic though. It was almost like the Blair Witch Project of its time. Like found footage in a way. On the Road by Jack Kerouac. The Beat Generation can shove it up their ass. On the Road by Kerouac. I found it self-serving and trite and not at all the rebellious Corbett it is made out to be. There are so many better books and authors of his generation. I really don't get why On the Road is such a touchstone for the Beat era. House of Leaves. I tried to get into it. I really did. But the constant flipping back to the like 10 indexes and holding the book sideways and all that other nonsense had me like, reading this book is way too much work to be worth it. The protagonist isn't compelling enough to make me want to do that work. Grapes of Wrath. Ugh. So much description of dust. Lolita. Which I personally thought was boring. And couldn't wait to finish it. That said, despite the fact that I didn't like it, I could still appreciate from reading it that Nabokov is a very talented writer. So at some point I'm going to give some of his other books a go. No matter how hard I've tried, I could never finish Brave New World. I loved 1984. And I love the world building in Brave New World. But just something about Huxley's writing style makes it an absolute bastard to follow. And you can go through 50 pages of it without anything actually happening. That, coupled with the way he spends 3 pages with entirely unrelated and fragmented ideas in a row, rather than putting them into a cogent narrative, just ruined it for me. I know I should have enjoyed it, but I really just couldn't. Madame Bovary. Pages and pages describing every item on a table or in a room in excruciating detail do not make a good novel. Nor does a protagonist that no sane or even remotely well-adjusted person could possibly identify with or like, who is also too dull and stupid to even be an interesting villain or anti-hero. Flaubert can take the sublime and blow it out his ass. As Above. Heart of Darkness. The Catcher in the Rye. Also The Last of the Mohicans. Michael Mann is a genius to make such an amazing movie out of that thing. Wuthering Heights with Heathcliff. That little girl ghost, and all the whining about the moors, seemed like a muddled laudanum dream, monsieur, hard to read, follow, and stay awake enduring. Tess of the D'Urbervilles. I know it's how things probably would have been handled in the time, but I just wanted to shake her by the shoulders and tell her to have more gumption and not be so passive about her life. I really have never understood the love of The Catcher in the Rye.
Thanks for watching and please like and subscribe to support the channel.